voy para Nayarit. Llevo cero, voy para Macané. Llevo a Puerto, voy para Nayarit.
Okay, hi everyone coming in. We're gonna wait just a minute or two before we get started. Oh. Yes, I'm good. All good. Okay, welcome everybody in. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of Buena Vista Social Club, one of my favorite musicians from Cuba. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. This session is just for the AP Spanish Language and Culture, the email task. So this is the first section that you will get when you get to the open response portion of the exam. So just want to get started and let you know that heads up, this is being recorded and might appear on our website, YouTube, or anything else we may use with Fiveable's Publicity. So if you have a question, your name could appear on the screen. Just make sure you change your name. If you want to avoid it, you can always put your favorite flavor of taco instead, or you could put salsa picante if you want to keep it anonymous. That's totally fine. I would also encourage you guys to make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms because that will keep you super informed and also let you tune into our other Cram sessions and anything that you might miss out on. So we're on Twitter, Insta, YouTube, all these different channels at Think Fiveable. So go ahead and follow us there. Okay, so I want to share just a little bit about me. I know for some reason I don't think you can see my camera. I'm not sure why. Maybe it'll pop up later. But my name is Britt, but all my students call me Profe, so you can feel free to call me one or the other. Doesn't matter to me. I'm originally from Michigan, and I went to the University of Michigan, so I'm a huge fan of Michigan athletics. Go Blue. I first taught in Charlotte, North Carolina at a KIPP school. I taught 7th and 8th grade. And then for the past 8 to 9 years, I've taught at a school on the west side of Chicago called Roe Clark. I teach Spanish 1, AP Spanish, and ESL, and I've had 8 years of teaching AP Spanish. So I have a lot of experience. I've also been an AP reader. So if you are like, I really don't know what's going on, no te preocupes, estoy aquí. I will help you out and make sure that you feel super comfortable. I also love to travel, so I really encourage all of you to study abroad. And also, it's really great for using in the section of the Comparación Cultural. So let's keep it moving and talk a little bit about the test. So before we get there, I want to just launch a quick poll. So it should pop up in the bottom of your screen. How are we feeling about the AP Spanish exam? Are we feeling ayúdame, nerviosa, nervioso, más o menos, or creo que bien? ¿Cómo nos sentimos? Okay, bueno. I don't have anyone saying ayúdame right now, so that's probably a good sign. I'm feeling good about that. Okay, let me see if I can click publish results. Okay, so we're feeling a little nervous and a little bit más o menos. Okay, awesome. All right, let's go ahead and hide that puppy. Well, I hope I can make you feel a little bit teensy better. So we're going to go over, this is everything we're doing today. I'm going to quickly just go over the instructions for this section of the test. And then I'm going to give you the pro tips checklist. This is what I'm going to use to make sure that you get a 5, and it's super simple, show you some samples, and then just leave you some time for some questions and answers. Also, before we get started, if you guys want to interrupt me at all at any point, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm going to put in the chat right now. Oh, I didn't even notice I have some holas in here. So let me just put a chat in here. Hola, ¿cómo están? Espero que bien. So yeah, feel free to open the chat. If you're like, wait, hold up, tengo una pregunta, just stop me and I will feel free to answer it. So you are going to write an email message. You have 15 minutes to read the message and write your reply. Your reply should include a greeting and a closing and should respond to all the questions and requests in the message. In your reply, you should also ask for more details about something mentioned in the message. Also, you should use a formal form of address. Okay, so this is the basic stuff. The short of this is you got 15 minutes. As soon as you get to this section, just skip reading the instructions. You already know what's going to be asked of you, so skip that part and go straight into the meat of it. Okay, so I'm going to teach you now a little bit more about exactly what they are looking for. Okay. If you're someone that likes to take screenshots, I really recommend screenshotting this page because this is all of the pro tips that I'm about to go over. So if you follow these 6 steps, I guarantee you that you will be able to get a 5, okay? It's the email portion of the test is what I think is lo más fácil. It's super simple because it's kind of like a math equation. All you got to do is plug in these 6 things, bada bing, bada boom, you're going to be able to get to a 5. Okay, so we're going to break these down one by one. And just like I said, if you have a question or you don't understand or I'm going too fast, just put in the chat like, whoa, lentamente, por favor, or whatever it is that you need. Okay, so pro tip number 1. When you are writing the email, you must use a formal address, okay? This is not, you're not writing a letter to your auntie, your best friend, your grandma, your sister who lives in Mexico. This is a super formal email. You have never met the person before, so you should be using exclusively usted. You should never be using tú. So examples of how to address the email I have in the blue section, 1, 2, and 3. You can say estimado, señor, señora, doctor, doctora, y debes usar 2 puntos. 2 puntos. I see in here, are you going to explain the section, the multiple choice section? Yo voy a explicar la sección de multiple in the Cram finale. So the Cram finale, I'm going to go over multiple choice, the whole multiple choice section. This is just right now for the email portion. But if you have a specific question about the multiple choice section, you can stick around and I'll answer it at the end of this Cram if it doesn't go the whole hour, which I don't think it will. Okay, so going back to this pro tip, you need to make sure that you use usted. You could use señorita, but most of the time the person that's writing to you is señor or señora. If it says, ¿qué significa 2 puntos? Let's say I want to write like, estimado director Marquez. And you put the 2 puntos after it to say like, I'm writing to you. So sometimes students put a comma after because that's kind of the way we formally write a letter, but this is an email address. So it's better to put those 2 little dots there, right? And yeah, you could put señorita if that is what the email is signed. So the main thing is to check the gender of the author at the end, or it will tell you in the title of the introduction. So sometimes I have students that will like accidentally write like, Dear Mr. Marquez, but the letter's actually written by Mrs. Marquez or Doctora Marquez. So then you look like a fool because you misgendered them. Okay, no comprendo 2 puntos todavía. Eso es como una salutación. So en vez de poner una coma, poner 2 puntos al final de la introducción. So, por ejemplo, yo voy a explicar cómo, sí, eso también. So, gracias. Ustedes me están ayudando mejor que yo. So I could put, like, let's say I want to write to Victoria. I could say, estimada señora Victoria. And then I could continue writing, he recibido su correo, blah, 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 blah. So it's just like the first thing you say, como una introducción a esta persona. Does that make sense? Sí or no, Anaya? Ok. Sí, es la puntuación, lo siento. Usa eso en vez de usar una coma, porque eso me marca más como estás escribiendo un correo formal. Un correo formal. Ok, bueno. All right, voy a seguir a pro tip número 2. Okay. You must thank the person for the letter at the beginning and at the end of the email. Okay, so hay que decirle gracias al principio y al final del correo. So I have some examples in the blue. Le agradezco de antemano por mandar el correo. Notas aquí, I'm using le. Okay, you cannot use te because this is a formal email. So if you use te, they're going to mark you points off. Make sure everything you use should be in conjunction with usted. This is a formal email. Another example, he recibido su correo electrónico y le agradezco por mandarlo. And then the two examples I put at the bottom would be something that you could put at the end of the email. Le agradecería enormemente si pudiera explicarme, blah, blah, blah. Estaría muy agradecida si usted pudiera, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So, esos son dos ejemplos al principio y al final. So, you should thank them both times at the beginning and then again at the end of the email. Okay? And again, just presta atención. Notas como estoy usando le, su, usted. Think of it as you're writing to like your boss, okay? Un jefe or una jefa. It should be super formal. Okay. Pro tip number 3. This is what I just kind of said again, but be formal. Think of this as an email for a job interview. So you should use usted exclusively. So if you can see in the blue section, what I have underlined are all of my examples of usted. Gracias por su ayuda. Espero que me pueda ayudar. Bueno, yo veo tu pregunta en el chat sobre las preguntas. I'm going to get to that, so I'll answer that in a second. I say, cuídese mucho. ¿Cómo piensa usted sobre Debe ser super formal, okay? They actually will take points off if you use to or if you use any informal form of address. So they will take points off, so just make sure you use usted exclusively. Okay, and then I'm going to move to my next tip because it actually goes over sobre las preguntas que me preguntó. Okay, the author is always going to ask you questions, and it's actually mainly not this one, but the next one. So my bad. In the email, the author is always going to ask you questions. There will always be 2 to 3 snuck into the prompt. And sometimes the questions will be very easy to find, and sometimes they will not, okay? This is when you should respond to the information needed creatively and culturally, okay? So this is your time to drop some cultural knowledge bombs, like names of artists, cities, types of food, music, historic events. Usa la información que conoces sobre la ciudad que está en el correo electrónico para responder en su respuesta, okay? And you can make this up. Puede ser inventada or no tiene que ser real, and they're never going to figure out if you actually did what it is that you said that you did. So a lot of times they're asking you to be a volunteer at some type of exchange program. So you can always just be like, oh, sí, yo hice un programa en Chile el verano pasado, donde yo tuve que asistir a un programa, bla, 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 bla. Inventa lo que estás hablando para responder a las preguntas. So just make sure no matter what, you must answer the author's questions. Any questions about this part before I move on to my next tip? No? Okay. I'm going to show you some examples of this too, of like, we'll look at and try and find author's questions so that everyone's ready. Okay, so this is the part where I'm getting to the questions. You need to ask a minimum of 2 questions back. Oh, I see that. Let me go back real quick. So I see, how do you know the cultural knowledge? The cultural knowledge is just anything you can pull from your brain. Échale crema a tus tacos. Oh, I love it. That's perfect. Yeah, it's anything you can pull from your brain to be relevant to what it is that they are asking. So if they're asking you to be like, are you interested in spending a summer at this marine biology camp in Costa Rica? All right. Just be like, oh my gosh, yes, I love marine biology. You know, the last summer I spent the summer in Florida and we spent all day on a boat looking at tortoises and turtles, and it was fantastic. I would love to be part of your program. Now, it does not matter if none of that ever happened, right? They're never going to know. They don't care if you're lying. The whole point is that you are trying to relate to what is being asked. Now, let's say they're being like, I want to do a marine biology program in Costa Rica. You can be like, oh my gosh, yes, I've heard the food is delicious in Costa Rica. I would love to try gallo con pinto, which is like the really typical Costa Rican breakfast. So that would be an example of like historic or a type of food, like a cultural bomb that you could drop. Yeah. Yep. Just like Hasiel said, like you can just make stuff up. They're not going to fact check you, but just like you can say, oh, I've heard, it doesn't matter what country they're asking you to go to. You can say, I've heard the food is fantastic. I would love to spend a summer there. You know, you can say, oh, what's the weather like? You can say, oh, I've heard that every July they have this celebration. I would love to be there for it. You know, just make it up so that you're tying back any type of cultural knowledge you have. And we'll go over what that looks like in a couple examples. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the pro tip number 5, which is asking 2 questions, okay? You must ask 2 questions in your email response, right? So for example, even if we don't know specific names, we can just make it up and talk about it. Yes, you can, but you'll see what I'm talking about. Like you can be like, oh, I spent a summer at the Marine Institute in Costa Rica. Like if you made that up, that's fine. It doesn't matter. But you also only have 15 minutes. So you don't need to write 6 paragraphs, right? This is actually something that's done pretty quickly. So I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so going back to my screen right here, which is pro tip number 5. You need to ask 2 questions and you need to use proper punctuation. So notas como hay una pregunta al principio y al final de la pregunta. ¿Cuántas horas tendré que trabajar? Okay, this is a very basic question that you can fall back on if you get stumped on a question to ask. It's best to put the verb before usted because otra vez, eso es más formal. ¿Qué hace usted el horario? Or like, that's actually, that question doesn't make a lot of sense. That's my bad. But like any example that you would put, make sure you're putting in usted because you want it to be formal. Okay. And then, como siempre, just presta atención to the accents on question words. So, ¿qué, cuándo, cómo, quién, cuál, y cuánto? Make sure you have those correct accents on the right vowels, okay? So these 2 questions is where you can kind of get spicy and be creative about anything you want to ask about. So another example I have on here is necesitaré comprar mi propia comida. Will I need to buy my own food? A lot of times the questions are asking about a volunteer program or a homestay or your past involvement. So you can be like, está bien si nunca he probado surfing? Because one time there was a prompt about like, do you want to be a teacher at this surfing school? So you could ask like, is it okay if I've only surfed for a summer? That could be like one of the questions you ask. So anything that's related to the prompt. And then the last thing I want to say about this is asking the person how they feel or how they are does not count as a question. So if you ask like, ¿Cómo está usted? That doesn't count as a question. That's more of like just an introduction or a greeting. So I would really make sure you ask 2 questions related to the prompt. Okay. Any questions about questions before I move on to the last tip? No? Okay. Then the last tip is super simple. It's just using a formal goodbye. Okay, so try and use a formal goodbye that is different from the one that is used by the author. Okay. So for example, atentamente, cordialmente, respetuosamente. These are all examples that are formal and good closing. And again, do not forget to thank the person for their email again. So muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad de tener esta beca en la ciudad de Santiago. Yo tengo muchísimas ganas de visitar la ciudad y conocer la cultura chilena. Whatever, right? Just make it up. How should we introduce them? Who is them? What do you mean when you say how should we introduce them? Are you talking about the questions? Anaya, can you rephrase your question? What do you mean how should we introduce them? Oh, okay. You can introduce them by saying, like, para responder a sus preguntas, sí, sería un placer tener la oportunidad de ir a su escuela de surfing. The introduction can be the same que usó el autor, porque estimado va a aparecer por ambos. So, yeah. Está bien si el autor usa estimado y tú usas estimado también. But yeah, going back to your question, Anaya, you can just say like, después de leer su carta, yo puedo responder que voy a estar disponible empezando en junio hasta agosto. If they had asked, like, when will you become available? You could say, like, to respond to your question, I will be available starting in June until August, period. Your introduction, I already answered that question. Yeah. Y sí, puedes usar estimada por ambas, but al final debes usar algo que es diferente. So, atentamente, cordialmente, respetuosamente. Okay, so these are all of my pro tips. So I want to go over and do some examples with you where we can point out now a little bit more what this looks like in person. So we're going to do some sample email prompts. Try and remember the checklist that I just went over with you, and we'll look for the questions in these together. Okay, this is a prompt that came from AP Spanish preparing for the language and culture examination. And I'm actually going to click out of this real quick and just copy and paste the link into our chat. Yes, this is recorded. So if you are like, wait, I want this resource, I'm just going to link this in here. It's just on Amazon. You can Google search it. But now I'm going to go back to presenting. Okay. This is the textbook that I pull the most from in my class because I think it's just the clearest and most well organized. But there's tons of textbooks out there. You can buy this on Amazon. You can rent it. But I just want to give the author a shout out. It's by Jose M. Diaz, and my students say that a lot of times the test is easier than these prompts. So I feel like it's better because this one will help you level up. Okay. So I know tal vez va a decir un poquito difícil a ver. It might be a little difficult to view. I'm going to read the introduction real quick and just lay the background and then give you about 1 to 2 minutes to read the email. Okay. So la introducción dice, has recibido el siguiente mensaje electrónico porque te inscribiste en una lista para trabajar como voluntario o voluntaria en el Centro Latino. La señora Montes, directora del Centro Latino, te ha escrito este mensaje. Okay. The introduction is always helpful because it's going to tell you who is writing to you. Okay. So as you can see here, they used the dos puntos right here after estimado futuro voluntario. So when you respond back, you'll use those as well. Okay. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes now to read this email. I want you to try and find the questions in the email. So I'm going to put that in the chat right now. Just the directions for what we're working on right now is 2 minutes to read the email and then find the questions the email is asking you. Okay. After 2 minutes, we'll come back and go over it. So vamos a comenzar ahora. Thirty more seconds. Okay, so after reading this email, you can tell just by looking at it, they didn't make it easy because you can't find the question marks. So they did ask you questions. Muy bien. Ya veo una respuesta en el chat. Yes, so one of the questions is, ¿en qué área te gusta trabajar y por qué? ¿Qué nivel de español eres y tienes experiencia trabajando con hispanohablantes? Okay, is there any other questions that we're missing that Meli, if I'm pronouncing it right, you can correct me if I am not, did not say? Are we missing any questions? There actually is one other question that you should respond to within this prompt. So see if you can find it. Aún nos falta una pregunta que no está en el chat. Yes, good. The last one there is ¿cuándo y con qué frecuencia quieres ayudar? Good. Excelente respuesta. So you can see here, all the questions are within like a 2-sentence part, but they don't have question marks. So just presta súper atención porque a veces no es súper obvio. Hay que buscar dónde están respondiendo. Malia. Okay, gracias, Malia. Está bien si no tuviste los acentos. Okay, so this is one example, all right? Remember, you only have 15 minutes to respond, so you don't need to write back 4 pages. In fact, you can just write one super phenomenal paragraph and it's fine so long as you get through everything you need to get through, okay? So now that we have this, I'm going to do, now that we have the questions in the chat, I'm going to give you an example of how you should respond to them, okay? I'm just going to do this orally. I'm not going to type it into the chat, just to give you an example. So you can say, ¿en qué área te gusta trabajar y por qué? Me gustaría trabajar con los adultos porque yo he tenido mucha experiencia ofreciendo ayuda con traducción con adultos en mi comunidad en Chicago. Mi nivel de español es que está muy bien porque yo he aprendido desde que tenía 13 años. Así que yo puedo hablar bastante bien y también puedo comunicarme con personas de lugares muy diferentes y países muy diferentes. La experiencia que tengo trabajando con hispanohablantes es durante la universidad. Yo estaba involucrada con un club donde yo enseñé el inglés a adultos en una biblioteca 2 veces cada semana. Por esta experiencia me siento muy, no sé, me siento súper bien que yo puedo ayudar en cualquier ocasión, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So those are just examples of how I would respond to those questions. I made sure to answer all 3 of them with enough detail, but then still keep it moving because I have other things to do. So yes, Victoria, I only have 15 minutes to read and respond. So you're probably going to spend 3 to 4 minutes reading, which realistically leaves you with about 10 minutes to respond, okay? So you'll just have to keep it moving quickly from there, okay? Okay. Now, before we move on, I want to brainstorm together what would be 2 good questions that we could respond to this email with. So what are 2 good questions we could ask in our response back? Go ahead and drop them in the chat, and you can put them in English or in Spanish. It doesn't matter. Look, ¿dónde te sientes más cómodo? Good, Anaya. ¿Qué son los datos de ese programa? That's one good question. What's another good question? Good. ¿Cuáles recursos necesito para asistir a las familias inmigrantes? Excellent question. Yes, great. ¿En qué nivel de inglés están los estudiantes actualmente? Excellent question. ¿Cuáles recursos necesito para asistir? Yes, good. Both of those questions work. You could also get, ask, is it possible I could work there for a paid job if I do really well? So, ¿sería posible tener una posición con un salario si hago un buen trabajo en el futuro? Right? Just invent something up. You don't know, it doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, another great question. ¿Los estudiantes van con sus familias o son de una familia? Yep, good, good, good. Es una pregunta para usted, señora. Great. I love that you're using usted in there, making it super formal. Okay. Now, what you'll also notice here is in the closing, she said, atentamente, María Eugenia Montes. So since she used atentamente, I would use a different saludo back. So I'd probably say cordialmente or respetuosamente. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Respetuosamente. My bad about that. Just to make sure that it's different. Okay. Now, don't forget at the end of your email to also thank her again. So, quisiera decir gracias a usted por esta oportunidad porque tengo mucho interés en trabajar con personas bilingües y ayudarles a tener la oportunidad de aprender inglés. Okay. Any questions on this prompt before I move on to my second one? No? Okay, let's move on to our second example then. Okay, here it is. So this is from the same book, from Jose M. Diaz. And this time the tema es Los Desafíos Mundiales. So I'm going to take a moment now to read the introduction. Always read the introduction because it's like kind of the baseline for you to understand what it is that they're asking you. El siguiente mensaje electrónico es de Carmen Yanguas, directora de una organización dedicada a la conservación del medio ambiente. Has recibido este mensaje porque ofreciste ayudar en el lanzamiento de una nueva campaña ambiental. Okay. So it's asking you now to respond about whatever it is that Carmen is asking you. Okay, so ¿qué hacemos si no recordamos vocabulario que necesitamos en el correo? If you don't remember vocabulary that you need in the correo electrónico, just talk about it, like in a circle. So habla sobre el vocabulario en una manera rotunda. Si no sabes la palabra, describe la palabra o intenta usar otra palabra. Pero nunca uses inglés. Nunca, 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 nunca. Entonces, tal vez tienes que si olvides. The best example I can think of is one time there was a persuasive essay about whales, okay, about ballenas. And one of my students didn't know how to say the word whale in Spanish. So she freaked out. So she just said animales marinas. Instead of saying like whales, she just used a different word. So if you're freaking out and you're like, I need to talk about whales, pero se me olvidó cómo decir la palabra ballena, está bien, usa otra palabra. So, por ejemplo, animales marinas or animales grandes que viven en el mar. You know, whatever. So long as estás usando el español, está bien. So, nunca uses el inglés, pero si usas el español, tranquilo, vas a estar bien. Okay, so vamos a hacer la misma cosa otra vez. I'm going to give you 2 minutos, 2 minutes to read the email. Okay. Find the questions it's asking you. All right, let's take 2 minutes. Go ahead and read this email. take 30 more seconds. Okay. Bueno, necesito algunos voluntarios. Por favor, pon las preguntas en el chat. ¿Cuáles preguntas está pidiendo este correo electrónico a ti? What is the email prompt asking? And you can put in the chat either in English or in Spanish. Okay, good. So it's asking 2 or 3 sugerencias y algunos consejos prácticos, specifically to reduce CO2 emission. Good. And also, yep, thank you, Anaya. How can we distribute the information? And it says specifically, we're relying on your knowledge of the Latino population in your community to let us know. Okay. Good. So the two questions we have here, and this time it's a little bit easier because they gave you these 2 check marks that were kind of like, oh, light bulb, ding, ding, ding. Here's where the questions are. Mm-hmm. Good. So everything I'm seeing in the chat is correct. Yes. The 2 questions it's asking here is, what are 2 or 3 pieces of evidence, or excuse me, pieces of advice that are practical that you could give to reduce emission? So you could say, examples, you could say, para mis sugerencias, yo recomiendo que las personas usen las bicicletas para ir al trabajo, así que hay menos emisión de los automóviles. Y también recomiendo que la gente recomiendo que compañías más grandes tienen más programas para el medio ambiente. Whatever. Again, you're just making it up. And then suggestions about how to communicate to the Spanish community. Again, you're just making this up. It doesn't have to be actually how you think it would work. And then good. Yes, I was worried because we didn't see this question right away. But it also says, finalmente, es muy importante saber su nivel de compromiso en términos del esfuerzo y tiempo que pueda dedicar a la campaña. So it also wants us to respond and say, okay, how much time and effort are you going to be willing to give? So you can say, estoy súper apasionada sobre eso, pero yo tengo otro trabajo donde yo cuido niños desde 8 de la mañana hasta 2 de la tarde. Así que no puedo trabajar durante las mañanas, pero voy a estar responsable por las tardes y por las noches. Just make it up. No tiene que ser exactamente real. Okay. All right, so then, muchas gracias por toda la participación. I'm going to ask my last question then. Yes, you are definitely able to annotate on the test. Puedes marcar exactamente dónde están las preguntas. You can circle them. You're definitely allowed to annotate and mark it all up. Mm-hmm. Do scientific accuracies matter here? I don't think when you're a reader, they necessarily matter, but they do need to be related to the prompt. So let's say you're like, shoot, I don't know how to reduce CO2 emission. You can even, you can say like, from my understanding, the 2 best ways to reduce CO2 emission are blah, 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 blah. And so long as you say them in Spanish, it's okay. And then if you're like really freaking out, if you're like, I have no idea, and you tweak out on the thing, you just write that in your email. Be like, de verdad, no sé exactamente algunas urgencias sobre cómo reducir la emisión, así que yo quiero ser un voluntario para aprender más sobre este problema. Nunca hemos estudiado eso adentro de la escuela. I didn't understand the second question. Okay, so the second question says, en segundo lugar, precisamos urgencias sobre el medio de comunicación más eficaz para difundir los mensajes de esa campaña de publicidad. So Carmen is the person who's publishing this new campaign about how to reduce global warming in her community. And what she wants is your help getting that message out to the Latino population. So she's like, what's the best way to reach them? So you could say the best way to reach them is to go door to door, knock on the door, and have face-to-face communication. The best way to reach them is on Facebook and using social media. The best way to reach them is to send emails to, their email addresses, or the best way to reach them is to blah, blah, blah. Like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're just making it up. Yeah. Victoria, let me know if that makes sense now. Otherwise, I can restate it. If it were me, I would probably say, hoy en día toda la gente usa teléfonos móviles, así que yo creo que sería muy útil si usamos Facebook, Instagram y Snapchat para comunicar esta nueva publicación y campaña de medio ambiente. Yep, it can be basic like social media. Just make sure that your sentences are a little bit detailed. So it shouldn't be like, puedes usar social media, period. That doesn't tell me that you know Spanish. It should be like 1 to 2 sentences in your response. It doesn't have to be exclusive to the Spanish-speaking community, but this is what the prompt specifically asked. So if this was your prompt, the answer to that question would be yes, because it says, contamos con su conocimiento de la población latina en su comunidad. So she's specifically asking in this prompt, like, how do I communicate with the Latin population? But they might sometimes in other prompts just be like, how do I communicate with the population in your high school, in your hometown? So it just depends on what the prompt is asking. Okay, then let's wrap up with this prompt. And I'm just going to put in here, what are 2 good questions you could ask? What are 2 good questions you could ask? You could say that, hello. You could say like, recomiendo que la campaña use las redes sociales porque las redes popularidades, and then I would put examples in, como Facebook, Instagram y Snapchat son populares en muchas comunidades que influyó la comunidad hispanohablante. And then if you wanted to be extra spicy, you could say, yo les puedo ayudar en hacer un story en Snapchat para ayudar con su nueva publicidad, or whatever it is. Yes, excelente. Great question, Malia. Excelente. ¿Cuántas personas cree este programa puede alcanzar? Excelente. ¿Qué nivel de oportunidades de investigación estarán disponibles como parte del programa? Yes. ¿Qué disponibilidad busca en los trabajos voluntarios? Excelente. Sí. You can also ask personal questions. So, ¿está bien si solo puedo trabajar en julio? Is it okay if I can only work in July? Because she's inviting you to do this. It's not official yet. So if you get stuck, you can always just go back to timing and say, is it okay if I only do this? Or is it okay if I only do that? And it should work. ¿Qué conocimiento de calentamiento global necesito para participar en este programa? Perfect. That also works. Okay. We already did that one. Okay. So any questions for me? And this can be about the email prompt or about anything related to AP Spanish. I've taught it for 8 years. So I've closed out most of everything we're working on for this cram. I'm going to be leading other crams about all of the other sections on the test. So voy a estar aquí otra vez, creo que 4 veces más para hablar de las otras secciones. But cualquier pregunta, pon en el chat y voy a responder. ¿Nadie tiene preguntas sobre cualquier cosa? De verdad, yo no repaso mucho la gramática en las clases de Cram porque es hay mucha gramática, mucha gramática. Entonces, normalmente no, pero si eso es algo que quieres, me avisas porque tal vez yo puedo preguntar a Fiveable si eso sería posible. Y también me puedes hablar yo creo que está en mi otra pantalla, en this one, en Discord. Yo estoy en Discord y si tal vez tienes una pregunta sobre algo de gramática, siempre me puedes comunicar también a Jaciel. Él está mi TA y ha estudiado mucho y él se puede ayudarte también. No problema. Bueno, voy a quedarme aquí, así que si alguien tiene más preguntas. If you don't have any questions, though, you're free to go, but I'm going to stick around here in case anyone wants specific help, specific questions, anything that you feel anxious about for the test in general. I can definitely help you out on because like I said, I've been an AP reader and I've taught it for 8 years, so soy una experta. Les puedo ayudar, so dime si necesitan ayuda. Bueno, sí, yo voy a tener una sección sobre eso para la sección de la conversación y la comparación cultural. Pero les puedo dar un poco de consejo ahora si te sientes muy nervioso o nerviosa. Estas secciones, si no tienes un acento muy bien, como yo, porque yo soy gringa, yo no soy hispanohablante nativa, obviamente mi acento es muy fuerte, muy americana, pero eso no vale mucho. The readers don't care that much about your accent or how you sound. It's more so about if you're able to communicate your ideas clearly. Also, when you are in the speaking section, if you make a mistake and you correct it, you don't get any points taken off. So, si haces un error y corriges el error, la persona que está calificándote no va a quitar puntos, porque ahora yo entiendo lo que estabas intentando decir. So, tal vez deciste, cuando yo tengo 5 años, yo viví en México. And you meant to say when I was 5 and you just messed up. if you make the correction quickly to like cuando yo tengo 5 años, cuando yo tenía 5 años, it's fine. Hiciste la corrección. Ok, si tengo consejos para la sección de múltiple. Bueno, mi consejo sobre eso es que empiezas a leer en español cuando tienes tiempo libre, ¿ok? So, mi número 1 consejo sobre the multiple choice es que empiezas a leer ahora en español, ¿ok? Porque la razón es que tu mente va a sentir más cómodo leyendo si ha tenido práctica. And if you want practice with the reading, I have 2 suggestions. One would be to read a book that's very simple that you've already read in English. So, for example, Harry Potter or Twilight or The Hunger Games, and read it in Spanish. This will really, really help you with your comprehension. Se me hace difícil las tildes. Hay algunos recursos que me podrían ayudar con eso. Ok, bueno, Victoria, de verdad, las tildes no tienen mucha importancia en el examen AP. Okay, so tranquilo sobre eso. I never tell my students that because I want them to be perfect, but if you mess up a couple accents on the test, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You're not going to get a huge amount of points taken off. So don't worry about the accents. It's not the end of the world. Obviously, we want them to be as perfect as they can be, but it's not a part of the test where, okay, this student missed 2 accents, so now they get a 4 instead of a 5. It's not as serious as you think it may be. Yo no tengo una sesión para escuchar tampoco. Las sesiones que tenemos ahora para Fiveable son exclusivamente lo que están para the open response questions. So tenemos eso que es el correo electrónico, la conversación, el ensayo persuasivo, la comparación cultural y el final. Yo no tengo más de eso, pero si estás súper interesada en eso, avísame, como yo ya les dijo en Discord, porque tal vez yo puedo preguntar a los jefes y las jefas de Fiveable si nos pueden darme otra oportunidad de solamente cómo mejorar sus cosas de leer, cómo mejorar sus cosas de escuchar. Because I can always ask Fiveable if that's something they would do. Okay, so we have about 2 minutos más. Any other questions? Any other preguntas? ¿Algo que te sientes muy nerviosa, nerviosa? ¿No? Ok, la última cosa que quiero decir a ustedes, obviamente, es 1000 gracias, pero también yo quiero decirles que hay bastantes 5 en el AP exam para todos, ¿ok? So, como yo he sido un AP Reader, yo puedo dar un 5 a cada estudiante que merece un 5. So, no debes sentir como es una competición o solo 500 estudiantes pueden recibir un 5. Eso no es como funciona el examen AP. So, si tienes las respuestas correctas y si haces el checklist, vas a recibir un 5, ¿ok? No te preocupes, que tienes todo lo que necesitas para tener éxito, ¿ok? So, voy a pedir de stop sharing. Tal vez ahora me puedes ver. Ok, hola. So eso es todo para mí. Muchas gracias por venir. And if you're interested, si estás interesado, mi siguiente sesión es el 4 de abril. It's on April 4th, and that one is the cultural comparison. So if you're interested in that, you can join me on April 4th. It's a Sunday. Un domingo at the same time, 4 o'clock Eastern, okay, 3 o'clock Central. So I'm available on Discord. Si tienes cualquier pregunta, soy una maestra, me siempre Well, I always want to talk about Spanish. So I'm here if you ever need me. If you want me to look over something for you, I am here. I'd love to help you out. If you're like, I want some feedback on this thing my teacher asked me, I don't know if it's good enough, send it to me. I will help you with it. I think you can find me at Brit on the Fiveable website. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and end this event, but thank you guys so much, and hopefully I'll see you at another cram session soon. So adios.